out here again. It's Wednesday lunchtime again. I know where the morning went. I thought, where did the morning go? I know where it went. But before I tell you about my morning, let me show you the garden. Because it's windy out here. I'm not going to talk to you about what I've done, but I want you to see what's happening. So yeah, you know, the spring bulbs have died down, and my husband, bless him, has somewhat tamed the jungle. It needs more work, but it was so long, it was not like you could actually mow it. But you can see the lilies are coming up, right? And look, here's something that you get as a bonus for letting the lawn grow, which is weeds that have pretty flowers. I don't know what it's called, but there it is. You know, the lawn flowers are really pretty. And here's something that I need to pull out. I always pull out the rosettes. And red clover. But look at this close up. It's actually really gorgeous. So I enjoy lawn flowers, and that's another reason not to get too carried away with mowing the lawn. And we have roses. The roses are pretty much happening. Oh my God, the roses are somewhat invaded with something that's growing through it that I haven't had time to pull out. But it's pretty. It's all very pretty. And here are lilies and coriander, and you can see the lotus lake pelargonium in the back. It's all happening. This is early summer. So, and that's the Hokitika rose. So it's all happening. There are still white flowers on this thing that I don't know what it's called, but it's beautiful. And there are some new things. I mean, look at this. This is the white rue. It's really growing up now, shooting up. And the new fuchsia is starting to sprout. So everything is happening outside. The luculia has got these beautiful red leaves on. It's all just, you know, it's a fabulous time of the year outside here. And this is the new star of the show, the Deutzia. And yeah, there's a massive mulching pile. That'll wait till the Christmas holidays. But look at this. The Deutzia is just in full flight. It's fabulous, and you can see it just moving, and there are bees, and everything's just, this is it. It's the perfect time for me to show off the Deutzia. And there are still a few magnolia flowers, and look, the sky is blue and white. And there's one more thing I want to show you before I go inside, is this. I keep forgetting to show you this, but I'm not forgetting anymore. So I moved a lot of things. I completely redid this bed, and there are now these really mad lilies that come up here, and I put them in one row, and they just go, as you can see, quite insane. And then there's this really dark blue lobelia. It's fabulous. It's almost electric blue. I don't know how well that comes through on the screen, but it's lovely. And then you have the big, tall Christmas lilies, which of course don't flower at Christmas time. They're always a bit late, but they're coming up here. They're huge. That one is just about as tall as it will get. It's almost 1 metre. And we have gladdies, which haven't come up to flower yet, and then different gladdies over there, and my marigolds, calendula, are just starting to flower. And I put a big, you know, one of these big succulents in here, and then the wind properly broke it off. But it's still there, and I like it, so it's staying. And then we have the feverfew, which is so brilliant, just so bright and gold and delicious and yummy. And this is something that's just coming out. You can see I planted these bulbs in a spiral, and a single lily in the middle. It's a short one that I just wanted to put on its own so it wouldn't get lost. And so it's all happening. Of course, these are the autumn crocus, which are all dying down now. So yeah, this bulb is called Queen of the Blues. It's actually something that's really invasive, and that's another reason I decided to plant them here in a spiral. They can grow up thick and wonderful, and you've got to stop them from running to seed, or you'll never ever have anything except these growing. But they are really nice, and so I wanted you to see them. So this is the bulb bed that I redid. It was a big job. Used to have concrete blocks here with something growing in them, and the soil was all raised. And my lovely neighbour, oh look, see, there's the flower coming. My lovely neighbour helped me move the soil and put it in place on his property that needed more soil. Trying to turn that around. Yeah, that was lots of work. But that was more than a year ago, and now I have this lovely new thing that I've created. So now I'm going to go inside and tell you what I have done today, because I'm feeling pretty pleased about it. Just head on inside. Take my hat off. Don't need that now in here. And it's quieter. And so I can put things in their place and settle myself here and tell you what I wrote this morning. Once I've got myself organised. See, the phone in its little stand goes on the laptop, and then I put this here so I can lean on it, and I have my little notepad, and I can even see the clock. Man, I raved around outside for 6 minutes. Okay, so this is the news. So you might remember that last week I cracked a bit of a nut. It was something that I really wanted to get, and it's this whole thing of how you can have a single, very emotional experience and it can change you for life. And of course there are plenty of people who understand exactly what that's like, because that's exactly what's happened to them. And that highly charged emotional experience can be good or it can be bad. For example, it can be a traumatic event that happens in your life, or it can be the birth of your child, or your the day that somebody proposes to you to be married, or you get that job that you've been working for 10 years. So it can be a really good experience as well as a bad experience. But the key thing is, if you have a very emotional experience, it makes a lot of changes happen in the brain very quickly, and that's why you remember it. Because there's all these things going on in the brain, because when you have a lot of emotion, you have a lot of chemicals, and the chemicals in the brain that are released because you have a lot of sensory information, a lot of thoughts, a lot of response, all those chemicals happen, and they help the brain to make lots and lots of neural connections to remember what's gone on, either because it was bad or because it was good. It doesn't matter, the process is the same. So last week I figured that out, how to write it, how to make it simple, and how to be clear. And at the end of the piece, I was talking about our caveman dad, his name. I gave him a name last week, and I decided to call him Papo. The last piece that I wrote was about Papo explaining to his family. He's come home, right? And we'll come back to the cave, come home, and he has just survived being attacked and actually wounded by a saber-toothed tiger or a big cat. Might not be a saber-toothed tiger, but because it's prehistoric, right? So, big cat, he's survived, he's actually been wounded, he's come back to the cave, and of course, his family see that, and he's telling them everything that he's learned about the experience, because he wants them to know how he survived. And of course, if you're in that kind of situation, think of this cave people, this family, Papo, the big man, he's responsible for hunting for food and protecting them. He's got a really important role to play in the family. Now imagine if you see that he's come back and he's nearly died from something. You would immediately be thinking, oh my God, if he had died, we'd be in deep trouble. That's a big important thing. So what that means is that if you recognize something that's very nearly had that kind of impact on you, your brain is going to perk up and pay attention, and there's going to be chemicals, because you're going to feel feelings, right? It's like, oh my God, how awful that could have been. I mean, this is perfectly normal. We all respond like this. So the point I realized that I hadn't quite made clearly enough to satisfy myself in my writing is that when his family listened and they saw that he was wounded and they helped him, they did what they did to help him get better, that all of that would have impressed them and made their brain perk up, get aroused, pay attention, say, this is important, I better listen to what Papa was telling me. And of course, the information that Papa shared with his family actually saved his daughter's life down the track when she had her own encounter with a big predator cat. So, because her brain paid attention, because there was all that emotion, it saved her life later. So that's the point that I've nailed that now. It's finished. That nut is cracked. It's gone. It's done. And then I thought, well, what's the next step? And the point I wanted to make, the link I wanted to make, is that whether we have a powerful experience like that and we remember something because the brain has all that chemistry and we have all that information and we remember it because it was really bad or really good, Or we do something like learn a new skill and we practice and we practice and we make mistakes and then we succeed and we make some more mistakes and we practice some more and we succeed and we do something over and over and over and over again until we have memorized it as a skill, like walking or talking or writing or computer games or anything where you do it over and over again. You end up with a whole bunch of hardware inside your brain. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean is that every time you learn something, you make a memory and you sustain that memory. You revisit it enough to actually remember it, the next day and the day after that. Hi, Mega! Great to see you! Amazing, amazing person that you are. Every time you learn something, your brain hooks up at least 2, but probably 20 or 100 or whatever, neurons. They make connections. They hook up. Because they have to hook up to store the new information, the new fact, the new whatever it was. Every time you learn something, your brain changes. So if you learn a new skill and you practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it and practice it, more neural connections, more neurons ganging up. And I've seen little videos of this. It's not just like there's a couple of because a neuron's got a cell body and it's got all these bits that branch off the top. They're called dendrites. And then it's got a long thing that's like a tree trunk, and then bits off the bottom that make axon extend. That's the axon, and then you have axon extensions, and the bits at the bottom, like the roots of the tree, connect in this kind of three-dimensional jungle to the tops of other trees. That's what actually happens. The axon extensions connect to the dendrites of other neurons. And when you make a connection in your brain, when you learn something, when you remember a new fact, that's what's happened. And if you remember that fact again and again and again, and you add more things to it, when you remember it again, the connections that cemented that fact in your memory get stronger. They chemically, and I think also anatomically, get stronger. And when you fire it and you fire those connections, because neurons fire. And you make those connections, you fire and wire, right? And when you do that, you make the connections. And if you then add more facts that go with that original one, and you have more skill and you repeat it again and again and again, it's a little bit like beating a path through the bush. You start off with bush and you're fighting through with a machete to cut through the bush, and there's a little path, a little track. But if you keep going there and you keep working your way through, and then other people join you because, there's more thoughts, there's more facts, there's more traffic through that pathway, eventually you can end up with a 4-lane highway in your brain, and it's this big, thick neural trunk and this huge set of neural networks. So they're all compartments in all different parts of the brain about that habit, that way of being, that skill you have. Whether you feel awful all the time, which is what I've talked about, if you feel like crap all the time, understand that there is a ton of neurological hardware in your brain that supports feeling like crap all the time, because you've thought about it and you've behaved that way and you've acted that way and you've felt that way so many times that it has changed your brain. It is a skill in your brain. There's a ton of hardware about it. Same as if you have a skill to act or to dance or to paint or to do a particular job. It doesn't matter. Massive neural network in your brain for anything you're really good at. And if you're really good at feeling bad, you've got to understand that's going on in your brain, because if you're going to change your habit of feeling bad all the time, you're going to have to change that hardware. And if you're thinking, well, how in hell do I do that? Don't panic. There is a way. There are lots of ways, actually. But in order to understand why it's so hard to change when you feel awful, you have to understand that first there's a lot of hardware in your brain that's all very busy and that you've probably built up over years, or you've had a massive experience and then it changed you so much. There's all the stuff in your brain after that one experience, and then it becomes very habitual for you to feel that way. I mean, that's what happens with trauma. People get stuck in trauma. It can be PTSD or OCD or any kind of anxiety. The brain gets stuck and the hardware changes in there. So this is one of the reasons why change is really hard. But then, and I actually finished that off. I wrote this little piece about, we have all this hardware. Whether we do it gradually or all at once, we have all this hardware. And if you're going to change your habits of feeling or thinking or behaving or whatever it is, hi Eves! You have to change the hardware in your brain. But it doesn't stop there. There's another place where our habits and our memories and especially our feelings get stored, and it's in our body. It's in our body mind. It's not conscious. Your body mind is unconscious, subconscious. You don't have conscious control over it. And so the first thing to even begin to be able to start to think about, well, shit, how do I change my habitual feelings in my body mind? Because your body mind actually gets used to feeling like crap. It does. And you want to feel different. Your body says, oh, no, this is what I know. This is safe. It feels horrible, but it's safe. I know what to do. I'm safe here. Our bodies naturally resist change. Changing how you, if you felt bad for 20 years and you want to feel good, trust me, to your body that is changing, it's considered a threat. It will resist you. It's not your enemy. That's just what it's programmed to do, evolutionarily. So, what I've started to do, then, this is the piece that I'm writing now, is to say, okay, so yeah, you're going to have to change the hardware in your brain. You're also going to have to change some hardware in your body. But hang on a minute, how is it that our habits change our body? And yes, overindulging in sugary treats will change your body, you know, and we'll get, yes, you're on it, Eves. But I wanted to talk exactly about how it is that feelings can be just as overindulged as food or a particular activity that we do. Because it ends up being all the same. But I thought, well, okay, so we think and that changes our brain. But we also do things and then we feel. So when we do things, I mean, everybody's familiar, if you've got a weak muscle and you exercise, it's going to get stronger. The body changes. If you want to learn a particular skill, your body changes as you learn that skill, because that's just what the body does. It adapts, you know, it gets stronger or it gets stretchier or whatever it is. Hi, Peter! That's just normal. So that we can understand because we can see it. And we all know, well, most of us would know, that Arnold Schwarzenegger started off as a tall, skinny guy who had a dream to get to the United States and do something, but he was in Germany and he couldn't get out. And he saw the Mr. Universe thing and he realised, oh, if I get a big body and I win that prize, I can travel. So he changed his body, right? And he put in the work, and he also put a lot of work in here, but he changed his body. So we understand about that because we can see it. But you can't see how your feelings are changing your body. Most of us have no clue about how our feelings change our body. So this is what I'm starting to explain, to break down, and I'm thinking, how do I explain that our feelings change our bodies? Because they actually change our cells. And how do I explain that our feelings change how our cells work to the point that we're actually addicted to our negative feelings? And that is literally how it is. And so it's true. I know it's crazy to think that you can be addicted to feeling bad, but we can, and we are, and we do, and I know because I have been in the process of changing that kind of thing in myself for quite some time. It gets easier, but I understand why it's so hard, and it really helps to understand why it's so hard, because when it is hard, you can think, okay, this is what I'm doing, and this is why. So the first step to understanding how it is that our feelings actually change our cells. Okay, I can do this, I can change my body, but how are my feelings changing my cells? And you're right, Eve, if you eat a lot of sugary food, the sugar bombards receptors, and there's big gaps in my cell biology, okay, so I can't tell you everything about how this, but when there's sugar running around in massive quantities in your bloodstream because you've eaten a big thing and you've got a sugary spike, then your pancreas sends out a ton of insulin to mop it all up because a sugar spike is bad. An insulin spike is actually also bad. And it's bad in two ways. One, it's bad for the pancreas to keep on having to do it, and also the insulin itself in large quantities often does damage. But the point about that is that if you keep spiking your insulin, after a while, the receptors on the cells in your pancreas become less sensitive to the fact that there is sugar around. It takes a bigger hit to make your pancreas even send out the insulin. The tolerance changes. Now, how does that happen? It happens because there are receptors on the cells in the pancreas that have to get activated by something in the bloodstream. I think in this case it's sugar, but I wouldn't count on it because it's probably something between the sugar and what hits the pancreas that I don't know about. But something about you get sugar in your bloodstream, something hits a receptor on your cell that wakes it up, and then the receptor sends a message into the cell to the DNA in the nucleus and says, we need some insulin out here, and it gets made and pushed out into the body. But if you keep on hammering the cell over and over and over and over and over, it either gets so tired that it stops producing insulin, and that I think is type 2 diabetes, because of the cells, I can't do this, I'm exhausted. Or the other thing that can happen is that it has these receptors. I keep talking about receptors on the cell, and I haven't even talked about what they are yet. Well, I think I mentioned in an earlier video. But what happens is that depending on the individual environment inside a person, the cell either makes more receptors for insulin, which means it takes more receptors for whatever it is that sets off, let's say it's for a sugar molecule. I'm sure it isn't, the more I think about it. But let's just say that sugar triggers the receptor. I'm sure it doesn't. But there's sugar and it triggers the receptor, whatever chain it is, and, the cell sends out insulin. But if the cell says, okay, there's lots and lots of the signal coming in, it will actually end up making more receptors for that signal. And then those receptors start to demand the signal. It's like, I'm here, I'm working, I want something to happen, come on, I modified my receptors for you, fill me up with the sugar that says send insulin. And that's one part of how we can get addicted to our emotions. Our cells start to crave that signal because they've got all these receptors. The other thing that can happen, there's probably lots of things again, but this is what I've learned, is that the cell's receptors just sort of, it's like they get overloaded and they just shut up shop. So you can actually have fewer receptors. There's just too much, so it gets up the ghost. But whatever happens, the cell is changed because there is a repeated stimulus, and it doesn't have to be sugar. It can be depression, or anxiety, or joy, or gratitude, or any of the emotions that we can feel. But what you got to understand is that whatever you habitually, normally, usually, repeatedly, on and on and on and on feel the most, it changes your cells and it changes how the cells work. And that, by the way, is why our thoughts change the function of our cells. And I've got all that to explain yet, but our thoughts can in that way make us sick. I mean, everybody knows, you get really, really stressed, your immune system tends to get down and you get sick. Well, this is the mechanism. That's how it works. So the fact that our cells change when we habitually think, act, feel a certain way, when we habitually feel a certain way, the information goes to our cells and it changes our cells. So if you want to habitually feel another way, you have to change your cells. And that is the other major reason why change is so hard. Now, I'm running out of time, but I said in my little blurb about this video that our cells have brains. And what does the brain of the cell have to do with the fact that it's so freaking hard to change how we feel? Well, here's the thing, and this is the last piece I was writing before I ran out of time today. The cell, in its structure, right, blob, cell, right, it's got a thing around the outside that's called a membrane. Inside the membrane is the stuff called cytoplasm, which is kind of jelly-like snot, thin, but not like water. It's thicker than water, but jelly, soft jelly. And it's got a whole lot of little things floating around in it, which the cell uses to make energy, to get rid of waste, to help with the replication of DNA, all kinds of stuff. Hi, Augusta! There's all that stuff floating around the cytoplasm, and the cell needs that. And in the middle of the cell, more or less, is the nucleus. And the nucleus contains the DNA that needs to be signaled to produce proteins so that our body can live. By the way, insulin's a protein, every hormone's a protein, everything our cells make is a protein. DNA makes proteins. And Yeah, there's a whole lot I could say about proteins, but I'm going to run out of time. So the point is that people used to think that the nucleus with the DNA is what controls the cell. No, it doesn't. It's just a library. It's just a list of things that the cell can make. The DNA is huge what it can do, but it's just a library. Somebody's got to go and get out the book. It is the cell membrane which decides who goes to the library and what book they get out. So you change your cell membranes by constantly bombarding them with the certain feelings, good, bad, or indifferent. Those cell membranes are that's the brain of the cell. It's actually called the brain of the cell. It's not just the skin, it's the brain. Don't think of it as the skin of the cell. The membrane is the brain. It does the thinking. It decides what information gets in and signals your DNA. And the information that gets in is always our feelings. That's the environment inside our skin, is how we feel. You go for a run, you get a chemical rush from that. You have an experience with friends, good, bad, or indifferent, you get a chemical experience. That's called a feeling. That's called emotions. You have a feeling, you get chemicals. Whatever we think, feel, experience, sense, whatever, it turns into chemistry in our blood and it signals our cells. So when you want to change, it's totally fascinating. It's amazing and it's empowering. Because if you understand that this is why change is so hard, and you want to change how you feel, and you will, and you try, and as soon as something hits the old button, it just goes off like a program. And it is a program. It's in your body. There's all this hardware in your brain, and your cells are conditioned, that's the technical term, are conditioned to produce those proteins and respond easily or not at all to the stimulus, depending on, It's used to producing the feeling of feeling bad. It's not used to producing the feeling of feeling good, because you haven't practiced that. You practice the other one. So this is why change is hard. Now, don't give up. There's a way to change. There are many ways to change. But I find it really empowering just to understand that this is why it's hard. Until I understood this, I really didn't believe that it was possible to change how I felt. I felt pretty crap, really. And I did all I did all the intention, and I did all that. I mean, I had off to you, Eve. So I'm not knocking what you're saying. For me, I did all of that, and it didn't make a blind bit of difference. The only thing that has helped me to change how I feel, and I stress me, really, truly, properly change how I feel, has been to understand that this is where the change has to happen. And the kicker is, you can't make the change with your conscious mind. Hi, Bernadette! You can't think your way out of this. The body mind, the unconscious mind, the subconscious mind is 95% of who we are, and we can't change that by thinking. We have to do something different. We can definitely use thought, but you can't do it with your eyes open talking to me, and I couldn't do it with alignment. I couldn't. I tried so hard. So if you can, that's wonderful. Don't stop doing what you're doing that's working for you. Remember, this is coming from where I came from and what was working or not working for me. So that's what I wrote this week. The brain of the cell really does control how our bodies work, and it gets conditioned, it gets used to, it gets into a habit, just like we do, because it is. And so to change, we have to change the wiring in our brain, and we have to change the conditioning in our cells. And now I'm just starting to explain enough about the cell to give a little more understanding of how that works. Because you cannot understand about how we can get addicted to our own bad feelings unless you understand that the cell changes its shape and its function, and it gets used to it. And then, if you spent 20 years making it be like that, it might take you a little while, months or even years. It's been years for me, and I don't regret it, to change it back. I'm changing a 50-year habit. It's okay if it takes me a couple of years. So that's the update for today. If you have enjoyed this video, particularly if you're seeing it on YouTube, because hi YouTube people, Please do like, share and subscribe. I really appreciate your support. And if you would like more insights into this stuff, and if you would like to support my journey to bring this information to people around the world who will never otherwise access it, then please check out my Patreon. Go and have a look. It doesn't cost much to support me and mean the world of difference to me and to other people. Yeah, we have to change our own selves, and we can. So, big love. Thank you for joining me here. I so appreciate hearing from you. I love your comments. I like to reply to your comments because what you want to know is what I want to talk about and what I'm writing about. So until next week, I send you lots of love, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.